Hey, everybody. Welcome to another edition of The Drop. Greg Wyshynski, Arda, Öcal here with you every Tuesday and Thursday, wherever you get your audio podcasts, as well as the NHL on ESPN, YouTube. Emergency! Emergency! Full transparency, everybody. This is a re-recording. We actually had the podcast in the can for you, ready to go, ready to deploy. And then the news dropped that D.J. Smith was fired as head coach of the Ottawa Senators, so we had to come back together to talk about the big news. So, D.J. Smith gone as head coach. Assistant coach Davis Payne also relieved of his duties. In comes Jacques Martin, former coach of the Senators, back in as head coach. And Daniel Alfredsson, the legend, is in as assistant coach. Lots to dive into here, Wish. But my first question is, D.J. Smith has been on the hot seat for a long time now. He has been the popular the next coach fired pick for quite a while. So what do you make of the timing?
Well, conventional wisdom was that he was going to last through the season no matter what happened, because you had a new owner, you had an interim GM in Steve Staios. And so why would you fire a coach that the next GM was probably just going to fire anyway? But the problem for the Senators is that you had to get rid of him. It's not that he didn't last to the summer. It's that he technically didn't even last to the winter, Arda.
Right.
The Senators are a weird team. I mean, I thought they were going to be the team that burst out of the bubble in the Atlantic Division. That ended up, I think, probably being Detroit instead. Jason York, who you're going to hear from in a bit later, covers the Senators. He said they're a team that plays like they're better than they are, and that makes a lot of sense when you watch this Ottawa team play. Listen, DJ Smith got a raw deal in some cases, Thomas Chabot's injury, the Shane Pinto suspension situation. But again, this is a fourth coaching change we've had this season, Arda, and you can say that three of them track back to the same thing: goaltending. The Ottawa Senators look to have one of the better tandems in the league in Korpisalo and Forsberg, but instead they're 28th overall in team save percentage this season. It was supposed to be an asset. It turned out to be a liability, and ultimately helped spell the end of DJ Smith's tenure with the Senators.
Had 4 full seasons, as well as this was the 5th season for DJ Smith. Finishes not having made the playoffs for the Ottawa Senators. Right. Then in comes Jacques Martin, of course. Now here's the interesting thing. Jacques Martin was brought in as an advisor to this team, right? So optically, one might come to the conclusion, well, we have Jacques Martin, this legendary coach that did so well with the Senators once upon a time. Things aren't going so well here. We're in the basement of the Eastern Conference. Why don't we just plug and play the guy we already have in-house?
Right. Or optically, it's the senior advisor going, I must advise you to fire the coach and name me the new one. What do you make of the Daniel Alfredsson of it all, Arda? That's the thing that really surprised me.
Yes, and I'm happy about this, and I think a lot of Senators fans will be happy about it as well, because we know the relationship between the two. It's repaired now. He's back. He's in the fold, and now he has a very official job. First of all, I like the fact that he's pursuing the coaching gig. So, you could, now that he's taking this assistant coaching job, assuming he does well, let's say he's given, some offense, defense, power play, whatever it is, right? If he does well with what he's given, then all of a sudden people are already going to start thinking of, Alfie as a head coach one day, whatever the case may be, right? But he's beloved in that city. And so from that angle, I love seeing the legends of a team that played there for the majority of their careers come back in some capacity. And fans were just happy he was back. And now he's an assistant coach, which is even better.
Well, then you hit the nail on the head on that, by the way, which is that, this move, when I saw it in conjunction with the Martin hiring, this feels like more fan service than a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. Okay, you were there, you were trying to appease your customers. They're all very upset with how the team has gone. You give them Daniel Alfredsson, their ears are going to perk up. Everyone's going to feel a little bit better about life. I saw his name commiserate with his experience level as a coach. I said to myself, this is a franchise that is desperately trying to change the conversation, and naming one of your iconic players in franchise history an assistant coach is a good way of doing that.
So full transparency, we're going to take you now to a conversation we had with Jason York. We recorded this before the news dropped, but we did ask about the Ottawa Senators and their current plight being at the bottom of the Eastern Conference, as well as a very pertinent topic in the NHL right now. Have a listen.
The point there is, and I'm glad the kid isn't hurt, you know, a really good player, a young man in this league. But that's a problem in our league right now. Our players in this league do not put enough emphasis on making sure you're protecting yourself from hits like that, making sure you absorb hits like that, because we've kind of tried to turn this league into a no-hit league.
Jason is joining us now. He played in the NHL for 13 seasons, co-host of the Coming in Hot Sens podcast up in Ottawa. Jason, thanks for joining us. This is a hot topic right now. The idea of these kind of hits in the NHL and just the overall vibe of hitting. Let's talk about the Pastrnak play first. What did you see from that play, and do you think the punishment was justified?
Yeah. Hey, fellas. Yeah, thanks for having me on. And it's weird because you got a guy like Pasta, who's a 50-goal scorer, and he's not typically a guy that's going in there trying to run guys over and hurt them. So it's to me, it's just kind of a play gone bad. And you look at Lindgren, it's the perfect storm, right? He's reaching for a puck, and unless you've ever sat down a game ice level, people have no idea how fast decisions have to be made. And right there, Pasta makes a decision where he's going to go in and finish and try and win a loose puck. And it's bad timing. I think it should have been a board. But based on how the league's called, guys, now that's just what it is. So I'm not arguing the call. That's what's happening in today's NHL. But the reason it's happening is because we're now seeing the effect of players that have come up through a system where it's come full circle, where all these guys have grown up playing non-contact hockey till they're basically 15 years of age. And by the time you're 15 years old now, and you probably had a million hours of dress rehearsals, of going back for pucks, learning how to play, and you're just seeing guys that they don't expect it. And living here in Canada, fellas, if you watch an Ontario Hockey League game, which is the OHL, which is still one of the biggest breeding grounds for the National Hockey League, if you hit a guy too hard in that league, you could get a 20-game suspension.
Wow.
So guys are growing up almost. Imagine you're in your draft year and you miss 10 to 20 games. So you're just not going to hit the guy. But unfortunately, when you get to the pros and there's so much on the line, and that's why it's weird, because it's Pasta doing that play. Like if you're a fourth liner and you're going in on the forecheck and you don't do your assignment of taking out the D, you might be sent down to the minors. So that's why you see it more in the NHL, because there's so much more on the line. There's split-second decisions that happen every single shift. And sometimes they just go bad, but to me, it's a byproduct of players that have now grown up in an era where you're not taught to defend yourself until you're really 15, 16 years old. And then by then you've got so many bad habits ingrained in your game. It's really hard to reverse what you've already learned.
So one of the things that Tort said was that he believes the NHL has tried to turn its current product into the quote no-hit league.
I wouldn't go that far.
I was going to say, I mean, do you agree with him? And are there things that the NHL has done to help foster this moment where we're not seeing the same levels of checking that we used to see back in the day?
Well, Greg, first of all, if you watch the NHL playoffs in the third round of the playoffs and you compare it to what's called in the regular season, you're watching two totally different games. That's why playoff hockey is so good. But the fact of the matter is, too, you as a player, your body can't play 82 games that way. You imagine if every game that in the season was played that way? You just can't. It's impossible. But I do agree with Torts to some extent, but there's still big hits. There's still big plays. I just think guys are smart. Like they use it as a tactic too, like protect the puck, turn your body, shield, turn your back. And guys are taught that skill from a really young age, and they use it. And even guys, you'll see guys throw themselves into the boards, try and draw the penalty. But you see the rare time where you do that, and then, oh shit, the guy actually did hit me hard. and now I'm going to get a concussion. It's just, there's so many different things going on the ice, guys. Guys trying to draw penalties, guys going hard, depending on who's trying to do the hit. But I love Torts. Like what a story he is, eh? This year in Philadelphia, he's reincarnated himself. But he is right. But I wouldn't go. It's not a no-hit league, but it's getting close.
I will say I miss him at ESPN because he was a lot of fun to work with.
Hey,
Yeah.
he's such a quote machine, isn't he? He
Yeah.
was great when he was on here. When they had him on the panel with James Duthie on TSN, like that was classic television for Torts there too. Yeah, he's Torts is good for the game. I don't care what anybody says. He's
Oh,
good for the
agreed.
game.
Absolutely. So you play like you bookended essentially like such different eras of hockey, right? In your playing
Yes.
career, like from the early 90s to essentially the that '04 lockout. I'm
Yeah.
curious, like what we're seeing today, obviously compared to when you played, much different, or the
Yeah.
vibe is much different, et cetera. But is it just a product of the game is different, the vibe is different, the players are different? Like how much of this is hockey's just a different kind of game now?
I think it's like all sports, guys. If you watch the NFL now, like NFL purists will say, you can't hit the quarterback anymore. It's just we're trying to protect the star players. I understand that. We're trying to make it a more skillful game. They've added the 3-on-3, they've added the shootouts. Like they're trying, it's a little bit of the basketball analogy that's come into the NHL. Like when Bettman came in, you could see him, you try and promote 2 or 3 players on every team, and those are your star players, and you market those guys. But it's just like again, I go back to, yeah, it has changed. Has it gotten better? Yeah, it is. The product's better, it's more skillful. But at the end of the day, to me, I'm not going to say my era was better. I just think playoff hockey, I don't know if you guys agree or not, playoff hockey, when guys are playing hard, when guys are finishing every hit, it's still the best product you'll ever see. So I just think we got to find a happy medium. Like it's gone a little too soft,
Mhm.
but I understand it. But I'm not going to be that guy that says back when I played, it was better hockey. It wasn't. It wasn't.
It
Like you go back to the dead puck era, Wiz, and you watch when Dallas won their cup. That wasn't better hockey that we're watching now. Like this is better. It's just we've got to find a medium where you can't let the physicality of the game leave. You can't, because that's still important.
Well, look, Jason, as a Devils fan, I disagree. Dead Puck era was awesome. It was fantastic stuff.
Are
No,
you're a Devils fan?
oh yeah. Well, I grew up in Jersey, so yeah, I'm a Devils fan. So I relish the Dead Puck era. The thing that you just said though is something that I've really struggled with as somebody who grew up watching a different product, basically. Like
Yeah.
whenever fighting comes up, for example, and the fighting thing, by the way, I think has a lot of shared DNA with the hitting thing, where
Yeah.
kids now come up through these leagues where there's no fighting. They get to the NHL, and guess what? There's no longer any fighting, right? Even if there's been a slight uptick this season.
Yeah.
I've had to come to grips with the idea that the sport and the league that I loved doesn't exist anymore, and that I can't bemoan that fact. I have to embrace the fact that it's something different. And watching my kid, for example, who's a Devils fan, find her entry point into hockey by watching Jack Hughes and knowing it's a league where Jack Hughes hopefully won't get annihilated every other
Yeah.
night by hits
Yeah.
is kind of a good thing. That's where the product is, and that's what this generation of fans expects to see. So from that perspective, it does make sense. But the point that I wanted to emphasize with what you said, Jason, I find interesting is, are we now seeing maybe the starkest delineation between what the product looks like for 82 games and what the product looks like in the postseason? You're right.
Yeah.
It's almost 2 different leagues. What we
Yep.
see for 82 games with these guys pacing themselves and not trying to, get wrecked and be physically sharp and attuned by the time the playoffs arrive. You compare that with what we see in the playoffs, and it truly is almost like 2 different sports. It feels like at times.
100%, like 100%. And just to change for a little second there, I played against some of those Devils teams you're talking about, by the way, Greg.
Yeah.
And oh my God, Lyle Odeline, Randy McKay, Ken Danico, Scott Stevens.
Yeah.
Tough teams to play against. And yeah, I'm sure if you talk to a guy like Danico and a guy like Stevens, like would Stevens be able to even play in today's league?
Yeah, he
Like
would,
how
because he'd be Jacob Trouba. Like that question's come up a
No,
lot about Stevens.
I agree.
Yeah, and
I agree.
he played, though all those guys played with the rules that they were given. And so when you say to Stevens, you can hit a guy in the head, he's going to hit a guy in the head. But I think he was such a smart player that he would do what Trouba does today, which is toe the line. Like understand where the hit needs to be delivered, where you're not going to get suspended.
I agree, but Stevens hit, like people don't understand that didn't watch that era. Like Trouba hits hard, but
Yeah.
it's not even close to how hard that Stevens was hitting. It's not even close.
There
Like
was so much velocity behind it.
Oh my God. He perfected the art of exploding through guys, and I saw it firsthand. Like it was
He'd be starting the most fights per hit in the NHL by
God.
far
Hey,
today.
I remember, I don't know if I was in Ottawa once, and we actually had Andre Waugh. He was on the ice running around, and he took a run at Scotty Niedermayer and just destroyed him. And I happened to be on the ice at the time, and New Jersey had Danico, McKay, Christoph Oliwa, and Stevens. So two guys jump Andre Waugh, and I'm sitting there looking around. All of a sudden, here comes Danico, and I'm like, oh boy. And back then you had to fight. You had no choice. So Dan, I'm like 190 at the time. Big Kenny is like 225. He's like, let's go, kid, we're going. And I'm like, oh shit. Learned a valuable lesson though, boys. He's a lefty. And I grabbed him. All of a sudden I took two lefts right in the face. But that's what happened. Like if you hit a guy back then, you had to fight. Like it's you had no choice.
Well,
And if they
last one for me, Jason, because that's a really good point too, and that's something that Torts talked about. The big hits have become so rare in today's game that they're still answered with a fight. Like that's the response, because they stick out so much, because they aren't commonplace anymore. And that was one of the things that Torts said, was like the idea of, you having to fight after a big hit. It was a problem when you played. It's still a problem today, it feels like.
No, I would say the reason that fight happened because it was Scott Niedermayer. Now you're seeing fights when the guy in the fourth line gets hit too hard. It's like I watched a game the other day and I forget who it was, but it was like some guy barely got touched in the corner. Gloves came off. Because these young guys, they feel that, oh, I got to stick up for my teammate because I watched the game the other night where that happened. And it's an epidemic of just guys doing it now because they think that's the right thing to do. But the fight's really nothing anyhow. It's not like you're fighting Danico or Stevens or Oliwa or Randy McKay. Like no one's really getting hurt in these fights anymore.
The podcast is called Coming in Hot. You can follow them on Twitter or X at Coming in Hot Sends. Jason, please come back. Lots of stories to share. It'll be a lot of fun to reminisce as well. But thanks for joining us here on The Drop. We appreciate it.
Anytime, guys. Take care.
I see where they're coming from, with how my comment sounded. So that's definitely tough. I mean, I love playing here. I love playing in front of the fans. So, I mean, it's just tough, right? Like, I love playing here, so it's tough to hear the fans booing me there. Sorry.
Blues number 25, Jordan Kyrou. And you hear the cheers here tonight. You love these fans, don't you?
It's awesome. I love playing here. I love this rink. It was a great win by us tonight.
Yes, the roller coaster ride of emotions of being a hockey player and hockey fan. The cheers, the boos, they do come in waves, don't they? They certainly did for Jordan Kyrou, as you just heard. But we really had an interesting stretch of fan reactions, not just Jordan Kyrou, but John Tavares, who got his 1,000th point against his former team, the Islanders, on Long Island, only for the Leafs to lose in overtime. The most Maple Leafs thing to happen is that you can write a better script. But definitely the relationship there between John Tavares and Long Island, Kyle Dubas, former general manager, returning to Toronto, the fans chanting Dubas as the Leafs win 7-0. Yes. So before we get to dissecting each individual thing, I just overall, what do you like? This is not a new concept, but it seems like it's ramping up a lot lately. What do we attribute that to?
I mean, I listen, I don't think it's a new thing. I do think we've had a few incidences in a row where it's been very interesting and it has been dissected. The Kyrou thing in particular was fascinating in the sense that he kind of gave a no comment when asked about his relationship with his former coach, Craig Berube, who had just been fired. And then that no comment about their relationship was then extrapolated by the fans into being something negative. And Kyrou was having a bad season at that point too. He's only had like 5 goals at that point. So I think the fans decided to boo him, both because they thought it was kind of beat that he didn't come clean with how he felt about his coach. And then also the fact that he hasn't really been good and was probably one of the reasons why his coach got fired. So dissecting all these things has been interesting, but for me, Arda, like, look at, it's no secret that I did not come to this job as a former professional player. Okay. I came to this job as a fan. I grew up going to the cheap seats at the Meadowlands with my dad, going to Devil Ranger games. And here's how I feel about booing. With the amount of money that you spend on a ticket, you can do whatever you want. within the realm of good taste, you can act however you want and say whatever you want when you go to these games, because you've earned the right, in my opinion, to express yourself in any manner in which you want. The stuff about class, the stuff about this and that, hockey fans, what are we doing? Lectures on class as a hockey fan. You are passionately supporting your team. At times, you're passionately criticizing your team, and you sure as hell do not need to give any respect to the opponent unless if it's extraordinary circumstances, like Ovechkin breaking the Gretzky record level circumstances, in my opinion. How do you feel about booing?
I'm totally fine with it. In fact, it's encouraged in many situations. You should boo the away team. You should cheer the home team. That's part of the fun of being a fan. And like you said, paying a ticket, that is all part of the experience. Certainly, there are situations where things go over the line. I understand why people would call, certain situations respect, whatever the case may be. But here's a perfect example. I love it when a player returns to their former team. Not John Tavares. That's a different example. I'm talking about just pick any player that returns to their former team. They get the video tribute. They get the applause and the adulation from the crowd. The crowd acknowledges in that moment, hey, thanks.
Exactly right.
Thanks for everything you've contributed to this team. But then I also love that, soon after, that player scores a goal and the fans are booing him. I love it.
You nailed it. There's that one oasis that these teams have created for acknowledgement of a previous relationship with a player in the team, what have you. And then that's the moment in which you break kayfabe and you celebrate the player for that moment. And then they go right back to being the enemy. That's exactly right. Now, in the Tavares case,
yes,
I just found, dude, we didn't talk about it really at the time because there's a lot going on, but I found it to be absolutely insane, the takes coming from Toronto about the class of the Islanders fans and lay down your arms for a moment and cheer this man as he reaches a career achievement. Dude, I was at Nassau Coliseum when he came back for the first time. They were running over his jersey with cars in the parking lot. They were burning his jersey as kindling in the parking lot. The deep-seated animosity that exists between this fan base and this player, and you want them to just pause for a second to celebrate him getting a point on the tying goal of a game to send it into overtime for the road team? Are you out of your minds? What are we doing? How can we possibly expect that from sports fans?
I burning jerseys is the line for me. I think it's more silly for the person burning the jersey, running over the jersey with a car. I'm also a little iffy on snakes on the ice, but
oh yeah. For those who don't remember, when John Tavares obviously left the Islanders for the Leafs, there was a whole thing that the Islanders were convinced he was coming back. Then he goes and signs for this childhood team. And when he came back to Nassau Coliseum, not only was there, jerseys being run over, some used as kindling, but also the fact is that they threw rubber snakes on the ice, like it's Taylor Swift on the Reputation tour, to signify that John Tavares was in fact a traitor. It was one of my most memorable moments doing this job. I got to be honest.
But that's the thing. It's content. That's the other thing.
But it's also like a once in rare is the moment where you have that kind of relationship between a star player and a fan base go that far awry, and the fans having a chance to react like they did. That seriously is like a top 10 foot moment for me in covering games. The amount of vitriol that was in the building. And I remember after the game, the team talking about how offensive it was to John and this, that, the other thing. I'm like, dude, what do you want? What do you expect? I know these guys are humans. The Kyrou thing was a great example of that. But at the end of the day, man, sports is sports.
So let's generalize this. And by the way, Long Island was the perfect storm, like the perfect market for that to happen. So exactly. Let's generalize this.
Okay.
And talk about each item, but thinking of it in general. And we would like to determine to boo or not to boo in these general scenarios. So,
okay.
John Tavares, obviously the example here. A player returns after leaving as a free agent.
So normally I'd say that's booing, but I think that's one Arda, where there's context. Like, did the player leave as a free agent because the team has a really horrible owner who's extremely cheap and didn't want to pay the player, so they left, right? Or did the player leave to, go to greener pastures or go and play for the team under whose sheets he used to sleep as a child?
Yeah.
I think the context is important for that one, but overall, I'm pretty okay with a fan base booing a free agent that left.
Number 2 is a general manager who left because he wanted more money and power than Brendan Shanahan was. This is very specific, Wish, that Brendan Shanahan was willing to give him, comes back to his former city. This really narrows it down. Really narrows it down to one guy. I mean, you didn't even put in a Sue Greyhounds reference here, but I thought it was funny. Can I give you my honest takeaway from the
Please.
chants? I was surprised that Maple Leafs fans chanted. Like, I'm surprised that this happened in Toronto, because normally the slight against the Leafs home games is that it's all suits in the platinum seats and there's no passion there and you barely hear the crowd. That's the knock against Toronto home games. So the fact that they were cheering like that, and by the way, they also waited until the score was 7-0. Like, you know what I mean? It's like at that point.
Arda, if suits were going to chant against anybody, wouldn't it be a former executive?
Oh, naturally. Like, it actually was on brand, completely on brand.
I was surprised. Here's why I was surprised. This one's a little tough one for me, because I understand that, basically Dubas, if you're to believe what we've all heard and seen reported, priced himself out of a job and kind of, was sort of like, I don't know if I want to do this or not. And then Shanahan took that personally, and we know the whole story there. Like, if the Leafs win this year, ain't that Dubas's team? Like, wouldn't he get the lion's share?
Doesn't he get a ring? Like, wouldn't someone send him a ring? That I always thought about that with Yzerman and the Lightning. Like, if you build a team and then you leave right before they win a Stanley Cup, like, does the team give you a courtesy and be like, hey, you deserve this ring? Like, your name won't go on the cup because you're not here, but like, here's to this
again thing. We're expecting a level of sort of like insight and introspection from fans in that moment that we're never going to get. I think from a surface perspective of boy genius, never delivered more than a playoff round victory and then decided he wanted to run the team, I think from that perspective you can understand booing.
Yeah, sure. Number 3, player refuses to address whether he had a good relationship with a just fired coach. See, I'm okay with St. Louis's reaction in both instances. I'm okay with the fans being upset with the reaction from Jordan Kyrou. Like you said, he's not having the best season. The fans are expecting more. And then you have a comment like that, which leads itself to, well, now we need to know the full story and people are going to be digging about it, etc. But then he has a great goal and the fans are back on his side. Like, that was inevitable. It wasn't going to, this wasn't going to be a contentious or a difficult relationship between these two entities forever, you know? So I'm okay with the flow of events here. What about you?
I think you saw somebody who didn't realize he had become the main character that day. You know what I mean? Like, he didn't realize that the comment that he made or the no comment that he made had gone viral until a few hours before the game. He certainly had never heard that level of jeering and animosity from his home fans before, which kind of tells you what kind of career he's had, where he's never had to face that once. I felt bad for him because at the end of the day, what is Jordan Kyrou trying to do? He's trying to not trash the coach on the way out, right? So, like, by saying no comment, we all kind of know what that means vis-a-vis their relationship. But then obviously, like, the team's going bad. He's not playing well. The fans are gonna kind of use him as a lightning rod for a lot of things. Is it good to boo him? I don't know, man. Like, I felt like at the end of the day, he probably put it on himself because he just he probably should have just had the platitudes that he said after that game and said that to Jeremy Rutherford before the game. He kind of put himself in the situation. So the booing is understandable, but ultimately at the end of the day, I mean, he probably didn't deserve it.
And Berube is a beloved coach among St. Louis fans. He brought the team a Stanley Cup, and Jordan Kyrou is making a giant statement without saying the words. Yeah. So like exactly. that is also a part of that all. Okay. A fan fails a contest in the arena. Right. I believe first of all, I believe there's a Mendoza line of booing. So yes.
Okay.
Booing Boo, loud boo. Everyone in the arena boos. Absolutely acceptable.
Okay,
You
I
suck. Anything
think hold
like
on.
jeering,
Again,
chirping.
first of all, I can only assume that you would include children into this if they fail
No,
at
no, no, no,
their.
not kids, not kids.
Oh,
I'm talking
okay.
about
Because I was
adults,
convinced for a second.
adults that fail a contest at an arena.
The only time I
Let's
want to boo somebody for failing a contest in an arena is if they answer a trivia question with an answer that is just terrible, like the player doesn't even play for the team kind of answer. Or if you're doing the Scoro thing where you shoot the pucks from center ice and try to win a car, there is a tradition at Devils games where if the puck doesn't make it all the way down the ice, then you can boo the fan. And I think that is, in my mind, that is the most appropriate booing that you could do for a fan contest. If you do Scoro and you can't get the puck all the way down the ice, you deserve to get cheered for it.
I'm more merciless than you. I believe that if you are signing up for the contest, you know everything that comes with it, and therefore
you're
you
in
should.
for?
Correct. You should
Okay.
absolutely accept
All right,
the
all right.
possibility of being booed. A multi-platinum recording artist with $1 billion grossing intern. Wish you are on point with these today. $1 billion grossing international tour is dating one of the opposing team's best players and is shown on the jumbotron. Yeah. So
Now,
boo
this
or
was
no.
this was inspired by an actual thing that happened at the Patriots game on Sunday.
Yes.
Taylor Swift was on the jumbotron, and fans in New England, again the classiest sort, booed her for being on the jumbotron and wearing a Chiefs hat. You know what? As much as we are Kelsey Swifted out at this point, I think as a fan society, you don't boo girlfriends, you don't boo spouses, you don't boo families. Come on, what are we doing? I mean, and there have been some, just situations where maybe boos are a natural occurrence for some of the people that are shown on the jumbotron in that situation, but not Taylor Swift, not America's sweetheart, not Times Person of the Year.
Times Person of the Year. That is a good point. I think those boos had more to do with the fatigue of the story as opposed to the person being at the game. That's my theory.
Okay.
That's my theory.
My theory is that it was a game near Boston.
Yeah. My theory is Massachusetts. Number 7, the commissioners handing out the Stanley Cup or announcing a draft pick, et cetera, et cetera. I think at this point, Gary Bettman has embraced it. So
it's so good.
We just
never stopping, my fan friends. He, whether you think it's overboard or cliche at this point, you're right. Bettman getting booed is part of Bettman as commissioner. It's been a tradition for decades. One exception, Arda. One exception. If Gary Bettman secures your city a franchise, and this happened, I think, in Winnipeg, if memory serves. They cheered him, and we were all like, "What are you doing? Don't you know how hockey works?" But if he secures your city a franchise, or in the case of like the Coyotes, has fought for the last 15 years to keep your franchise there, then I think it's okay to give the man a cheer or two when he's on the ice.
But also, like, people are booing him in the your home. Say you're at Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Final. Your team wins. Yeah. It's a home game. So like everyone's cheering. Everyone's like, this is the greatest moment of their lives. And Gary Bettman gets on the ice. He's still getting booed mercilessly. Like in that moment where your team is about to be presented the Stanley Cup, like the best thing that could possibly happen to your team. And he's still getting booed in that moment. So like,
and I think what you said is the most important point, which is that he's embraced it by now. Like it's part of the gig. He leans into it. The Corey Schneider trade thing that we always reference in this show. There's all these other moments where he seems like he understands it's part and parcel of his gig to be the lightning rod that gets booed or just for being Gary Bettman. I don't know, but if he took offense to it, maybe we feel a little bit differently. If he was like, my granddaughter is very upset, like we would be thinking about it differently. But the man understands it, and in fact, I think in some cases relishes it.
Absolutely, just like a heel in pro wrestling. Absolutely loves it. The search for merch. This is where we put out a call to all NHL teams, the league, any hockey adjacent brands that are doing some fun stuff with hockey apparel or merchandise to send it to us so that we can show it off. The Detroit Red Wings. You did a really cool article about the gravy boat around American Thanksgiving. Shout out to our friend Ben Broder, who heads their marketing department with the Red Wings. I received a care package from the Detroit Red Wings, and the first thing that I'll start with, actually. So here are the boxes.
Okay.
I'll just unbox these. Spoiler alert, I did take off the styrofoam because that would have been very boring to watch. For those
Not a
watching.
true unboxing video. Sorry to everybody
No.
watching on YouTube that's used to the glory of an unboxing video.
So this is what the article you wrote, this is what the gravy boat looks like. The Zamboni
Is that plastic?
Gravy boat. No, it's
porcelain?
Yeah.
Oh my
very
God.
nice.
I had no
it's
idea.
Very nicely done. This is actually
I think I might
really
have written
cool.
that it was porcelain, then forgot about it, but that is so dope.
Yeah,
and the thing of the Red Wings, the Red Wings made me so happy when they said, we want to give these away at the pre-Thanksgiving game and have them be family keepsakes. And all I could think of was like, an 86-year-old grandmother like being like,
I love it.
I secured this for you in 2023 when the Red Wings had a home game, and now it's your families.
when Patrick Kane was with us for 6 months. No, I'm just kidding. This is a Dominic Hasek. I love these goalie, like these capsules. So this
What
is
is
Dominic
that?
It's a Dominic Hasek goalie capsule. You can
wow.
see like the little collectible stick and yeah. So I like these because it's cool. It could stand on your
And for those who don't know,
desk,
on the drop,
etc.
it's canon that Dominik Hasek is the best goalie of all time. Do we agree on that? I just said it's canon, and I didn't even ask you if you agree on that.
I would agree. I think that it's funny coming from you, the New Jersey Devils Martin Brodeur fan, but yes, I do.
I think Marty is greatly disrespected, and I think that he is more than a systems goalie. But Dominik Hasek is, again, to frame it in old guy reference, but also a current documentary reference. Dominik Hasek was the Barry Sanders of the NHL, like the single greatest talent on some of the most mediocre teams.
Yep, I'm glad that he was able to find ultimate success at the end of the in his NHL career. This is Thomas Holmstrom. He gets a bobblehead this year. I love that it's a stick raise. He's very happy. Here is the back of this. And by the way, for those that are curious, these are the bobblehead themed nights. We talked about the Jake Wallman Gritty night, which is really cool.
Yeah.
That is on January 21st. Alex DeBrinket's getting a bobblehead on March 2nd. And Brendan Shanahan, March 16th. Not against Toronto, though. It's against the Buffalo Sabres. So,
a team he never played for. The Holmstrom one's great, but if you have a goalie bobblehead, by law, you have to place the Holmstrom bobblehead directly in front of the goalie bobblehead.
That's got to be this set. And the last thing I'm going to show you, and I love this because I forgot about it. So this is a Mike Vernon mini mask goalie replica, but the cool thing about his mask, if you recall, is the double wing. So like the wing on one side, the wing on the other side. It's that was his mask design. I like the look of that because we're so used to seeing it on one side, obviously, but this is like the double wings. So shout out to the Red Wings. This is really
put some respect on it. That's Hall of Famer Mike Vernon, quite inexplicably, but nonetheless true. Hall of Famer Mike Vernon
and Stanley Cup champion Mike Vernon.
Right. Can't take it away from him.
So thanks to Ben and the entire Red Wings team. This is really cool. Be sure to find some good homes for these fantastic items.
Before we go, I just want to mention it's Connor McDavid week, Arda. All of Connor's games against the New York area teams, we have them on ESPN Plus. And it should be a fun time. Connor's adventures in New York. Shout out to the Rangers who get to play McDavid right after he plays the Devils, I believe is when it is, and gets them on the tail end. So good on the Rangers for continuing to get a friendly schedule this season.
Yeah, so that's all on ESPN Plus and our family of networks. So that'll be a great time. McDavid in New York. And that does it for us here on The Drop. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, wherever you get your podcast or the NHL on ESPN YouTube. Don't forget, we will be back on Thursday, and we will have special episodes for you sprinkled in throughout the holidays. So you can look forward to those episodes as well.
Well, let's just call our shot. Winter Classic special coming up the week after Christmas. And then to start off the year, the biggest stories of 2020. What are we up to? 2024 in the National Hockey League and hockey in general.
It's less ominous when you have to ask in the middle of the year. 2020, where are we again?
That's why I was never a professional announcer.
All right, goodbye, everyone. See you next one.
Bye.